Okay, so for today's topic, we will be talking about the endocrine system. So under the endocrine system, we would have the different glands which are found all throughout the body, as well as another component of your endocrine system would be, if they are not in the glandular structure, you would have clusters of cells that are found within the sublayers or substructures of your other organs. So that is also possible. Okay, so among the four basic types of tissues, we would have the epithelial, nervous, and the connective tissues, which are usually found within these glands of your endocrine system. For the endocrine glands which are found within your brain, you would have your pituitary gland and then your pineal gland. Then you would also have your thyroid gland in the neck area, ventral neck area. Then you would also have your parathyroid gland, which is also found very near your thyroid gland, hence its name para, which means beside the thyroid gland. Then you would also have your adrenal gland, or the gland that is found beside or on top of your renal organs or your kidneys. And then, of course, we would have your pancreas, which is, of course, quite special because it has two components, the exocrine and endocrine components. For the exocrine components, we have already discussed that during our lecture session under the digestive system. For this lecture topic, we will be focusing on the endocrine component of the pancreas. Okay, and for the cluster of cells found in other organs, such as your reproductive organs, we will be discussing those when we tackle that system. Okay, so what is the basic structure of the endocrine glands? So, of course, your endocrine glands, just like your exocrine glands, they would be parenchymatous in nature. But a key structural difference of your endocrine versus your exocrine glands would be the absence of duct system in your endocrine glands, because as a review, your endocrine glands would produce their secretions and diffuse it directly into the blood vessels and eventually into the blood or circulatory system, where these hormones will travel to the organs that these specific glands want to control or affect with their hormones. Okay. So for the functions of the endocrine gland, again, it basically regulates uh, the metabolism of the whole body, regulates the physiology in general. Okay. And then through this regulation, homeostasis is basically maintained. So if you would compare this with the action of the central nervous system, which is usually sends its signals or affects its signal via the peripheral nervous system, the action of the central nervous system would be very direct and very quick and very instant. Okay, while for the endocrine system, technically it is the central nervous system, especially the autonomic uh, part of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The autonomic nervous system would be the one which would control the function of your endocrine glands. Okay, so for the central nervous system, you would have quick responses through electrical signals, while for the endocrine system, you would have your signals will be delivered via your hormones, and it is slow and sustained. Okay, so how do these endocrine glands develop? So for example, for the pituitary gland, basically wherever you will find these glands, whatever tissues are nearest to those specific adult fate locations, those would be the sources of your glands. For example, for the pituitary gland, it, as I said earlier, it is found in the ventral side of the brain. So it just makes sense that a part of it would come from the neural ectoderm, so specifically the infundibulum. That's the specific name of the structure. So this is neural ectoderm, while the other subpart of the pituitary gland would actually come from the surface ectoderm of the foregut, specifically termed as your adenohypophyseal pouch. Okay, and then eventually this pouch will eventually bud off from the surface ectoderm, and then it will develop into the different subparts of your pituitary gland. And these subparts, because they are coming or originating from different types of ectoderm, they would be having different histological characteristics, which would basically mimic where they came from. For example, the part of the pituitary gland which came from the neural ectoderm would have a neural histology, which is reminiscent of your peripheral nervous system or your central nervous system. While the part which is coming from the default or surface ectoderm would mimic the histology of your actual normal glands. Okay, so because of this differences in their origin germ layers, this would give rise to different subparts in the organ, and apparently in different species the different subparts would be more developed or less developed, so it depends. Okay, depending on the functional requirements of that species. For the thyroid and parathyroid glands, they will basically come from the endoderm layer. The thyroid will come from an outbucking pouch of the endoderm of the up foregut, and then while the parathyroid will actually come from the pharyngeal pouches. Okay, and then they will eventually develop, and in their adult fate they would be intimately adjoining each other. Okay, for another example, for the adrenal gland, this one is really quite different, because for the adrenal gland, some part of it would come from the mesodermal layer. So that would be the cortex or the outer layer. And then eventually, the inner layer of your adrenal gland will be formed by the migrating neural crest cells, which come from the ectoderm layer. So for this specific gland, the endocrine gland, the different layers themselves come from different germ layers. Okay, so in general, the endocrine system, majority of the glands and the subpart of these glands would come from your usual ectodermal layer, while some subparts of these glands would come from the mesoderm, and some parts would come from the endoderm. So what are the endocrine glands? So for the purpose of our topic, we will be limiting these to the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the thyroid gland, the parathyroid gland, the adrenal gland, and the pancreas. Each gland is further subdivided into subparts, okay? So for example, for the pituitary gland, you would have the adenohypophysis subpart as well as the neurohypophysis subpart. So again, if you would remember during the developmental story earlier, the adenohypophysis would be the one that would look like your ordinary gland, while the neurohypophysis would look like more of your nerve trunk fiber, okay? Because again, they originated from different um, neuro, from different types of ectoderm origin. And then under the adenohypophysis, you would have your pars distalis, pars intermedia, as well as your pars tuberalis. And then in the pars distalis, you would have different types of cells. You would have your chromophobes and chromophiles. And then under chromophiles, you would have your acidophils and your basophils. And then under acidophils, you would have subtypes. And under basophils, you would also have subtypes. And then in other subpart, you would have a different type of cell present there. Okay. For the neurohypophysis subpart, you would also have another subparts. You'd have your median eminence, infundibulum, and pars nervosa. And then in the pars nervosa, this would contain majority of the axons, okay? As well as the cellular component, your pituicytes, okay? For the pineal gland, you would have these cells, okay? For the thyroid gland, you would have your follicles, and within the follicles, you would have your follicular cells, your colloid, the secretion inside the follicles, and then you would also have your parafollicular cells, again, coming from its name. Para would mean beside, no? So this would be the cells which are located in between the follicles, okay? And then for the parathyroid gland, you would have two types, the external and then the internal parathyroid. And then they would be composed of your principal or chief cells as well as your oxyphil cells. And then under the principal or chief cells, you would have your light and dark cells. And then for the adrenal gland, you would have layers or substructures. You would have your cortex, the outer part, and then the medulla. So just like your lymph nodes or your kidneys, it would have your outer and inner parts. For the cortex, it would be further subdivided into sublayers. So you would have your zona glomerulosa, which is named differently in other animals because there is a somewhat kind of difference in the arrangement of the cells within this zone. So later we will talk more about that. Then we have zona fasciculata and then reticularis. And then in zona fasciculata, you would have your spongocytes or the cells, which primarily make up this zona fasciculata layer. And then in the medulla, you would have your chromaffin cells. For the pancreas, of course, we would only focus in the pancreatic islets where these different kinds of cells are found. Okay, so for the pituitary gland, it is basically located in this area of the brain and it is directly connected to the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus, which is a subpart of the brain, is basically the one that is producing the hormone. And then after producing this hormone, these hormones will be sent down to the pituitary gland, specifically the neurohypophysis area, where it is being stored by the pituitary gland. So this neurohypophysis subpart of your pituitary gland basically is the one that stores the hormones being produced by the hypothalamus part of the brain. It stores it and eventually it's the one that releases it via the blood vessels located within it into the other organs, okay? Other target organs. So again, this would be your hypothalamus. It would produce the hormones and give it to the neurohypophysis part of the pituitary gland. This would be your adenohypophysis part. This would be your neurohypophysis. The neurohypophysis has your subparts, okay? You would have your median eminence, and then your infundibulum, and then the pars nervosa. While the adenohypophysis, you would have your other subparts as well. You would have your pars distalis, the part that is most distal from the brain, and then you would have your pars intermedia, and then the pars tuberalis, which is tube-like in structure. We will better appreciate this later when we show our actual diagram. So again, the anterior lobe is your adenohypophysis, and the posterior lobe is your neurohypophysis. So the neurohypophysis would have a connection to the brain area, to the hypothalamus, okay? So that's how you can differentiate your posterior lobe or your neurohypophysis from your anterior lobe, because your anterior lobe does not have a connection, direct connection to the brain, unlike your posterior lobe or neurohypophysis. Okay? for the neurohypophysis subpart. You would have your median eminence here. So the median eminence, guys, usually you can't really see it in slide preparations. Only the infundibular area, this part, is usually included in the isolated pituitary gland sections in slides. Okay, so you would have your infundibulum, and then you would have your pars nervosa here. While for the adenohypophysis, this part, depending on the cut, you may be able to see the tube-like part here, the pars tuberalis. So in this section, it should be in this area. And then you would have your pars distalis here and the pars intermedia here. So you will see that the pars intermedia is actually very closely located to your neurohypophysis. Okay? So pars intermedia, pars distalis, and pars tuberalis. Again, pars tuberalis, pars distalis, and here you would have your pars intermedia. So pars intermedia. Okay? And even in the subgross view, we can already see that there is some quite a big difference between the histological characteristics of the two sub areas. If we will focus in the anterior lobe or in the adenohypophysis area, you will see that it basically looks like your ordinary exocrine gland, right? You would have a lot of excretory cells which will have different names based on how well or which type of stain they are taking up. So you would have your acidophils, which would have your acidic or pinkish stain, and then your basophil, which would have your bluish stain, and you would have your chromophobes, which will not take any type of stain at all. That's why it says chromophobe. So it is phobia, so it's not taking stain. The acidophil and basophil um, can have subtypes, but again, under the HNE stain, it's very difficult to differentiate between these different types of, different subtypes of chromophobes. So again, if we want to pinpoint the exact subtype, we would use IHC or immunohistochemistry. For the posterior part or neurohypophysis part, as you can see here, it resembles your nervous tissue, right? We'll be able to see the axons as well as the pituicytes. The pituicytes will be the resident cells of the posterior gland in the neurohypophysis area, while the axons will be the continuation of the axons from the brain region from which your neurohypophysis is connected, right? And then what's special about the neurohypophysis or posterior lobe of your pituitary gland is that the axons located in this part of the gland would have these bulges called your herring body. Okay, so these herring bodies are a characteristic feature of your pituitary gland. Okay, so they are like bulges in the end part, near the end part of your axons. Okay, and again, it is very important that when you are looking at the histological sections of your endocrine glands, I want you guys to appreciate the presence of a lot of capillaries, right? Because again, we are dealing with endocrine glands. We do not have duct systems. Instead, the hormones are directly diffused into the bloodstream. Okay? Here is another preparation from the um, adenohypophysis part again, because you can see there are no pituicytes nor axons in this area, and you can see there are differently colored secretory cells. Okay, so another preparation comparing the acidophil versus the basophil and the chromophore. And again, other preparations, the herring bodies can look quite a little bit different. Okay, if you see this structure, then most probably you are not within the brain system, but you are looking at a section of the neurohypophysis of the pituitary gland. Okay, and keep in mind that since this is a 3D structure, depending on how you will cut the pituitary gland, you can have different views or sections, no? So what you have to keep in mind is the difference between the histological structures and characteristics of the nervus and pars nervosa and the gland part or the pars distalis of the adenohypophysis. Okay, just keep in mind that the nervous part or the neurohypophysis will be more will look like nervous tissue, while the adeno part will look like glandular tissue. And for the different parts, of course, these different subparts will produce different hormones, which basically can affect or control other glands or other specific organs. So that is what's special about the pituitary gland. It is a gland that one of its major function is to control the other glands. Okay, so it's a gland controlling other glands. It's a gland which produces hormones that would actually influence the action of other hormone producing glands. Okay, so here you can see that the adenohypophysis or anterior pituitary part, you would have different cells again, and then these different cells would be producing different hormones, and that these different hormones would actually travel through the bloodstream into their specific target organs. Okay, so it can be the thyroid gland or the adrenal gland or the ovary, etc. Okay, or the mammary gland or the bones. Okay, so again, since the pituitary gland is like a master gland which controls other glands as well as directly to other non endocrine gland organs, that's why it has a lot of different types of cells, and it also has a lot of different subparts. Okay. Now, for the pineal gland, so this is another gland which is very intimately located in the ventral part of the brain. You would have your pineal gland. Okay, so the pineal gland is a very important gland because its primary purpose is to produce hormones which would actually control the wakefulness of the body. Okay, so it is severely affected by the light and dark periods. Okay, so the pineal gland is located somewhere more deeper into the brain. Okay, this one. So in other animals, no, the pineal gland is called the pineal eye. This one, especially in the lizards, no. So they would actually have a structure here at the dorsal part of their skull, and it would actually have an opening. And then the pineal gland is very active and very important in their case because for this species or type of animals, a lot of their activities will vary greatly depending if it is daytime or nighttime. So it is very important in their body's function. Okay. So within the pineal gland, you would have a lot of astrocytes. And if you can remember, the astrocytes are actually also found in the parts of the brain. Your astrocytes are actually a type of glial cells. So they are the astrocytes located in the pineal gland are basically the same as the astrocytes located in other parts of the brain. But maybe there's a little bit of difference because these astrocytes have evolved to support the pinealocytes or the hormone producing cells of your pineal gland. So these pinealocytes would produce your melanin. So melanin would be the hormone that would influence other parts of the body and would tell the other parts of the body if it's already time to rest or sleep, if it is nighttime or time to wake up and work more, if it's already daytime. Aside from these pinealocytes and astrocytes, the one characteristic feature of your pineal gland are the presence of your brain sand, aka your corpora arenacea. So they say that this brain sand is like the byproduct of the production of hormones. But until now, actually, scientists have not been able to ascertain the specific function of this brain sand. But histologically, they would appear as this refractile structures, and they say that this brain sand is actually composed of calcium and phosphate, so it's like mineralized. And they say that it has value because when you are doing MRI or radiography, X-ray, this brain sand will show up very well under the imaging ng X-ray as well as MRI, and this can serve as a landmark that you are actually looking already at the pineal gland and not any other part of the brain. And again, since we are talking about uh, nervous system cells, so we know that immunohistochemistry is the best type of staining system that can differentiate the astrocytes from the pinealocytes. Okay, here is another preparation showing that the corpora arenacea or brain sand, but this time it they present as dark colored like debris like structures. Okay, so the pineal gland is quite special for me because one of the first um, research articles that I wrote or research study that I pioneered in our laboratory when I was doing my PhD. I studied how exogenous or additional melatonin can actually alter the neuronal architecture in the brain. And the results showed that if you add more melatonin, animals that were given additional melatonin, aside from the default amount of melatonin that is being produced in their pineal glands, uh, it will lead to more intricate connections within the neurons in the hippocampus. So more intricate neurons means better connections, faster connections. So this translated to better cognitive abilities as well. So we did IHC as well as IFA, immunohistochemistry, and immunofluorescence. That's why in this case, there are multiple colors present. Anyway, melatonin has been well proven to have very beneficial effects, and this is just another paper that adds to the body of knowledge regarding its purpose. Okay, so here we can see that these are from actual mice brain, while this one is from artificially cultured neurons. And we proved that the increase in melatonin also corresponded to an increase in a specific gene, CRP1, which had also been implicated in improved memory and cognition. Next, we have our thyroid and our parathyroid glands. So we will discuss them side by side because anyway, um, anatomically they are located near each other. So we would have our thyroid gland and then the relatively smaller parathyroid gland. So for the thyroid gland, you would have your follicles composed of your follicular cells, and then within this follicles you would have colloid, and then outside of these follicles you would have your parafollicular cells, while in the parathyroid, you would have your external type of parathyroid or internal type of parathyroid. Some animals will only have the internal type, some animals would only have the external type, some animals would have both. Okay, so it depends. And then within this parathyroid, you would have your different types of cells. Okay? So grossly, you would have again your thyroid gland, again located in the ventral area of your neck, near the trachea, and then you would have your parathyroid gland. So for those who are taking up cross anatomy, make sure that you appreciate this structure. Here, you can see your thyroid gland and your parathyroid gland, and in this case it seems like it is an external type of parathyroid gland, because otherwise you would see this structure embedded somewhere between here. Okay, and here you can see that the thyroid gland is composed of follicles, this one. Okay, and then in between these follicles you would have the um, parafollicular cells. And if we would zoom in, it would look like this. The parathyroid gland, and then the thyroid gland, and then the thyroid gland would have the follicles composed of your follicular cell, the colloid or the secretion inside, as well as the parafollicular cells or the cells located in between the follicles. Okay, so you can see the thyroid gland is also lobulated, right? So a more higher magnification, again, you would have your parafollicular cells, you would have your follicular cells here. They constitute the wall of the follicles themselves, and then you have the colloid. And again, please appreciate the presence of the blood vessels where the secretions will eventually diffuse. Okay? For the parathyroid, if the section is very well made and the staining is very, very good, you will be able to tell the difference between the oxyphil versus your chief cells. Okay? Oxyphil cells tend to have a larger amount of cytoplasm and more pink staining or acidophilic staining than your chief cells, which would have less cytoplasm in general. So for the thyroid gland, it produces different types of hormones which basically play a role in the metabolism, okay, or how the different organs consume energy, okay, as well as how some organs conserve or use or release calcium, okay. So actually, the thyroid gland produces the hormone which basically controls the parathyroid. Okay. And so for the parathyroid hormone, it affects the bones, the kidneys, and the intestines in order to reduce the in order to activate vitamins or increase the absorption of calcium. Okay. Next is the adrenal gland. So for the adrenal gland, again, it is located near the kidney. So it has two sublayers or parts. You have the cortex and medulla. So it looks like this. Very well delineated, at least for mammals. Key point for mammals, the cortex is well delineated from the medulla. In the cortical area, you would have different sublayers with different names, okay? Especially for the zona glomerulosa, which is the layer immediately after the capsule or the outer surface, the one that is nearest the outer surface. In some animals, the zona glomerulosa changes its name into arcuata because the secretory cells in that layer are arranged in arc-like structures. So these are especially true in some species, including the horse, cat, dog, and pig. So I think we have adrenal gland tissue sections from the horse in the laboratory. So please make sure that you're able to view these under the microscope, and take note that if you see this special arrangement, the name of the sublayer changes, okay? And these different sublayers, which has different names, actually would produce different types of hormones, okay? And then these different hormones would affect or would have different target organs in turn, okay? So one um, histologically a different type of cell that is located in the zona fasciculata would be your spongocyte. So it is termed as your spongocyte because it contains a lot of lipid droplets. So each cell looks like as if it is a sponge. So this is so because the zona fasciculata, as you can see here, um, produces a lipid type of hormone, specifically your glucocorticoids, aka your steroids, right? So the steroids, they basically play a role also in the control of the immune system, right? Okay, again, these are the different layers of the cortex, okay, of the adrenal gland. While the medulla will not have sublayers anymore, but the type of cells located within it is termed as your chromaffin cells. So this is your medulla, and this would be the zona reticularis or the deepest layer of your cortex. So the chromaffin cells are basically called chromaffin cells because in the olden times, this type of cells they found out it has a very high affinity to your chromium type of stains. Okay, so that's your adrenal gland, at least in the mammalian context, because apparently in avian the histological structure is quite different. The cortex and the medulla are mixed with each other. So there's now defined cortical area or medullary area. Again, this is quite special in the adrenal gland of your avian species. So again, I think we have avian adrenal glands, and make sure to compare it with the adrenal glands of mammals, okay? And try to confirm if really there's a difference between the arrangement of the cortical versus medullary cells, okay? So again, this is another example of your avian adrenal gland. So again, be very careful. Do not confuse this for a lymphatic organ, okay? Again, this is your adrenal gland. And you can see that the medulla is interspersed with your cortical secretory cells. The key point is that usually the cortical cells have a lighter staining as compared with the chromium-loving chromaffin cells of the medulla. Okay. Next, let's go to pancreas. So for the pancreas, we have already discussed this quite in detail in the point of view of the digestive system when we were talking about the ability of the pancreas to produce pancreatic enzymes, right? So the part of the pancreas which produces the pancreatic enzymes, it would be this part, right? The pancreatic acinar cells. But in the point of view of the endocrine system, we will be talking about this subset of cells or cluster of cells within the gland, and this would be again termed as your pancreatic islets or islets of Langerhans. And again, I want you to appreciate that since this cluster of cells is endocrine in nature, it needs the presence of blood vessels wherein it will diffuse its hormonal secretions. And again, for the endocrine islet itself, it is composed of your alpha, beta, C, and delta cells. And these cells are very difficult to differentiate from one another under regular or routine H&E staining. Thus, you will need, yes, immunohistochemistry in order to differentiate the different type of cells from one another. So among these different type of cells, it would be the beta cells, which would be uh, numerous, the most numerous within the pancreatic islet. Okay, and these different types of cells will actually produce different types of hormones, and in effect would have different effects, and they would target different organs as well. Okay. So that's all for today's topic. Please do not forget to accomplish the attendance form And the keyword for today's lecture topic is crocodile. Okay, so please type crocodile in the comments part of your attendance sheet.